What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the All of Life podcast. It's good to be here in 2025. This is the first episode we are recording in the new year. We kind of got a little bit off track there at the end of last year. We had sickness and holidays and all sorts of other stuff going on. I think like at some point, one of us each lost our voice. So it's good to be back. Hope to be able to get these out regularly on Mondays, every other Monday, at least twice a month. But y'all have to give us a little bit of grace in that because sometimes things come up. But anyway, we're in a new year, new season of our church, new sermon series. And so we're going to jump into some of that in a minute. But before we do that, if you've been with us, you know how we like to start here on the All of Life podcast. We love to start with just talking about some of the things that are at the top of our minds. And so let's start with that. I'll kick it to you guys. What are some things at the top of your minds today?
Yeah, today's MLK Day, and
when we're recording this is MLK Day.
Yeah, when we're recording it, it's MLK Day.
When you see it, it will.
Yeah, and so something that I always love to do is one of my favorite books of all time is Strength to Love by MLK, and so rereading sections of that, and there's a quote that I have always loved, and it's one that makes me pause and reflect, and I'll just read it. It says, "Christianity has always insisted that the cross we bear precedes the crown we wear. To be a Christian, one must take up his cross with all of its difficulties and agonizing and tragedy-packed content and carry it until that very cross leaves its mark upon us and redeems us to that more excellent way that comes only through suffering." And Jim, I know you actually preached
I heard a great man quote that recently.
Yeah, you preached on this very theme that he's hitting.
And I actually quoted
He used that same quote.
And you quoted this, and it's in one of my favorite chapters of that book.
Which chapter is it?
It is on love and action, I believe. I think that's the chapter title. But this morning, before I came in today, I was reading that chapter. And so, it's just one that always makes me pause and reflect on the reality. I think there's so much in that quote. But it's that in the Christian life, we will suffer because we follow Jesus, and our lives have a cross-shaped pattern to them. And yet the beauty is that God uses the suffering redemptively. And so, just that's on top of my mind today. And
read that first line. The first line, I love the way it's worded.
Christianity has always insisted that the cross we bear precedes the crown we wear.
Yeah. That's powerful. Yeah. Well, on the MLK theme, there's my favorite sermon is the Drum Major Instinct.
Oh yeah,
and it's
that's an all-timer.
Yeah, it's about the human impulse to be great.
Yeah,
and he says, don't get rid of that impulse. Yeah, God put it there for a reason, but you have to redefine greatness the way Jesus did, and that is to serve. And the last 13 minutes of that sermon, you can look it up online, it's on Spotify, YouTube, all those sorts of things, is some of the most beautiful call to service and reflection on who Christ was as a servant. Brings tears to my eyes.
Totally, man. Sermon. Totally. I guess I'll maintain the MLK theme today too, and I think something I was just talking to somebody about was oftentimes as MLK was taught in school to us, like the foundation of the movement, which was clearly about his faith, was often not taught. You know? And I remember even sitting in an MTC class and Mike Goheen saying, like, man, the civil rights movement, calling it civil rights is kind of like a downgrade to really what it was. It's like an image of God movement. And I think you cannot divorce the reality of what was actually driving MLK, which wasn't just civil rights. But it was that people are all created equally in the image of God, you know, and worth of dignity and value. And I think that adds a different sort of weight that civil rights actually doesn't just actually meet.
Yeah.
And what's interesting, just hearing you say that, even in Strength to Love, two dominant parts of Scripture get quoted by MLK in that. The book of James.
Yeah.
Because it's faith that really works, and he ties in righteousness and justice. And James is filled with that call. And then also Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount is filled with, which is interesting because we're talking about wisdom for all of life.
Right.
And we just came out of the Sermon on the Mount, and we're in the book of James. And these are really formative parts of Scripture for MLK.
Yeah. So if you're watching this after MLK Day, you should still go and like read Strength to Love or something like that. Yeah. His life is really worth diving into. He's got so much gold.
So much gold.
I have a dream speech.
Are we doing top of the mind?
Yeah.
He got Martin Luther King. I'm viewing this as just all discussion about MLK.
Let's do it.
Because I got another top of the mind. You probably have another top of the mind.
Well, no, I mean, that's kind of what I had. But if
that's what you had?
Yeah. Well,
so I'm the only one who didn't come in here thinking.
Come on, man. It's a holiday, you know? What do you have?
You were What's your other top of the mind? You were thinking about MLK yesterday when you sent us all the drum major.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Here's what I have. I was thinking about the Monty Williams quote. That everything we're after is on the other side of hard. And I thought, I'm curious, can you think of anything that doesn't apply to?
No.
Nothing?
No. Because it's not just about hard for the person participating in it or interacting with the thing in that moment. It's how the thing got there. And at some level of the development of whatever the thing is, there was something hard. There was a hard boundary that needed to be crossed. There was some obstacle that needed to be overcome.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think it depends on how you define hard, but it's hard to think about something that isn't.
Yeah.
Because what you're saying there is in anything that is produced, made, thing that you have to do, you're going to encounter some level of resistance.
Yeah. All right, so eating a piece of cake. Literally the phrase to describe something that's easy is piece of cake. How is eating a piece of cake on the other side of hard?
Well, we can start to dissect the cake.
Okay.
Like all the ingredients needed to be harvested. That was hard at some point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? There was a truck driver that needed, I'm always going to go to trucks, that needed to deliver that cake.
Yeah, long hours away from family. Yeah, absolutely.
Probably if you don't even get into how it was made, just the reality of you probably had to eat some stuff healthy that you didn't really want because you really wanted the cake and it was a little hard, And so it depends on how, but you think about kids growing up, you got to earn your dessert. And you got to eat the vegetables that don't taste well and but you get the cake. So I think it depends on the hard. There's actually hard work that went into it, but also could have just been like, man, I got to eat the stuff I don't want to eat so I can get the thing I really want to eat.
Usually it has to be purchased. Yeah. I'm sure there was some labor, involved with being able to afford a cake.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because I think when people think about the exceptions to that question, it just speaks to the reality, the creational reality of the need for grace.
Yeah.
That everything we're after is on the other side of hard, but often other people have to pay the price of the hard. And that's like an echo of Christ.
Yeah,
that,
absolutely.
That when I eat a piece of cake, it's not hard.
Yeah.
It didn't, but thousands of hours out in that field growing, the back pain of growing wheat and
even if someone comes and goes, well, now we have robotics. Well, even that was hard to be able to figure out and put together.
Yeah.
And so, to your question, I think everything is on the other side of hard at some point.
Yeah. And I think when people balk against that statement, they're thinking that it's a call to just grit and not grace, but I think it actually is a reflection of both. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah.
Did you have another top of the mind, John?
No, man.
Multiple peaks?
MLK is the one for me.
Cool.
MLK?
MLK.
MLK and Peel?
Key and Peele.
Oh, man. that's a great segue, though. I mean, we've kind of started to hint at it, like the new sermon series that we're in here at Redemption Tempe. We've transitioned from Sermon on the Mount, and we were in that for how long? How long were we in the Sermon on the Mount? It's hard to remember because we took a break.
It's like
there.
3 months.
Yeah, 3 months. And man, I don't know about you guys, but that series was a tremendous blessing for me.
Yeah.
I feel like Jesus' words always are pack a different punch in different seasons of life, right? And I felt like I heard them just the way I needed to hear them in this season. So
Yeah.
Hopefully you felt the same. And now we're in the book of James. And so we just kicked that off 2 weeks ago. Is that right? Yeah. And so, Jim, you kicked us off actually getting into the passage yesterday, the first passage. Jake did a big overview. And so hopefully that overview was helpful, got you oriented. And this week we got into one of, I think, the most known passages in the book of James around trials and steadfastness. So even before we get into that, I'd even love to hear from you guys. Like, what are you excited about as we get into the book of James?
Good question, man. What I'm excited about is how desperate we are, how desperate the world is for wisdom right now, and that there is more technology, more information than we've ever had.
Totally.
Yet at the same time, there is a deeper famine of wisdom than we've ever had.
Totally.
And so I think people are asking just the most basic questions. If you look at what podcasts are about, it's like how to breathe.
Yeah.
How do you eat? How do you have a conversation with people? And it's because there's been such a kind of deconstructing of creational norms that people don't know what even to do in the most basics of life.
Yeah.
And we need to go back to wisdom.
Yes.
And just say, from the brother of Jesus, who watched him firsthand, who came to know him not just as his brother, but as a savior, as his king, who led the early church in a time where there were a lot of questions. How do you actually live?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And Jim, I mean, some of the conversations we've been having around here, which I'm sure we'll have here at some point, around metamodernism. If you've never heard that term before, we're going to get into it, I'm sure. In some episode here.
Yeah.
But even like, as we went through kind of our training and we were talking about the book of James and what it's aiming to do to make us whole. Like how the current trend of metamodernism confronts that. And how James confronts that. So anyway, more to come there. Anyway, what about you, John?
Yeah, I feel like the thing that I'm really excited about, and for me personally, that I love about James is it is an incredibly challenging book of the Bible.
Totally.
And because of the wisdom, genre of literature, it is these shorter, easily digestible, memorable. A lot of people, maybe even without knowing it, have verses of James memorized.
It's true.
And yet, in that, when you really sit and reflect and pray, man, it is really challenging.
Yes.
Every time I read James, I get convicted, and I really do believe that when you rightly understand James, it is a sum total of the Christian life, of what it actually means to follow Jesus. And so with that, I'm really excited for some of the things that we're going to be able to talk about and hit. There's clear threads through the letter that James is addressing to the early church, and there are things that they're experiencing, and we're still experiencing a lot of those things today, even if it maybe looks a little bit different. And so, I'm just really excited for us to be challenged as a church community.
Totally. So one of the resources we have for you that we'll link in the description is we have a guide for you as you're going through James to be able to walk through the book by yourself with community and be able to dive into it even more. To answer that question for myself, like what I'm most excited about, I think it kind of like piggybacks on what you were saying, John. I feel like James and the plainness of it calls for a lot of wrestling. And I actually think like wisdom as a whole calls for a lot of like just wrestling, right? And oftentimes like we either want things like really black and white or like overcomplicated. I feel like James, in some ways, he has some things that are just said so plainly that we really need to just like wrestle with and truly ask God for wisdom on how we can apply it to our everyday lives here and now as followers of Jesus here in 2025. So
Yeah.
excited for that, excited for all that is to come. And today, what we want to do, one of the things that we did as we were thinking about, okay, how do we take what James is saying, the wisdom that is all throughout the book, and apply it to the different areas of our lives, right?
Yeah.
If you've been around Redemption for any time, the reason why we named this podcast the All of Life podcast, because we believe all of life is all for Jesus. And so we're trying to explore how the wisdom of James applies to the different domains of life. And so we have this tool. You got that with you, Jim?
Yeah. Right
Yeah.
here.
So we are, in a moment, we'll read the passage I just went through yesterday, and then we're going to talk about how it applies to different areas of life. So
Yeah.
you want to read the passage? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Let me talk through the tool real quick.
Sounds good.
Basically, we're just calling this back pocket wisdom, and it has on one side, or let me tell you the why for this. The why is that you can, as you engage the book of James, as you go through each text, ask the question of how does this apply to where I live, where I work, where I play, and where I scroll.
Yeah.
And the reason why we're doing this is because James is not hard to understand. What is hard to understand is how do you actually live that in your actual daily life. And he's calling for you to reflect and to make that connection. So what this is it's about the size of a phone, calling it back pocket wisdom. The idea would be that you put it in your back pocket after listening to a sermon or wrestling with the text, and then just any of the times that you would be sitting there looking at your phone, that you pull this out instead, and you reflect, you pray, you think through these different categories here.
It's cool.
So also on the other side,
pocket.
what's
Front
that?
pocket
It's even
wisdom
smaller
right here.
than my phone.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
could do.
This is like an iPhone 5C.
There you go.
Yeah, this is old school Apple right here.
You could do front pocket.
Front pocket wisdom.
The ladies can put it in their purse.
Yeah.
You can put it on your dashboard. You can do all kinds of.
That might be dangerous.
Well, wait until you get to the stoplight, man. Yeah.
We are against distracted driving.
Yeah. Yeah. Not
No text and drive. Instead, look at a piece of paper that looks like your phone and drive.
Officer,
I don't even know what the police would know what to do with that. They're like analog texting.
The question is, in what ways do I need Jesus? Jesus, get me out of this ticket right now.
Yes.
Oh, man. Sorry, Jim.
No.
Sorry, Jim. Too funny.
And then the other question on here
Yeah.
is, in what ways do I need Jesus?
Yeah.
Because everything that James is calling us to presupposes the work of Christ.
Yeah.
Amen.
It's not the thing that we do to earn our
Amen.
way to him, but it presupposes that we're in relationship with him, and this is how we work these things out. So, James is about being not just a hearer of the word, but a doer of the word. And this is a little tool to help you reflect on how do you do and not just hear. So maybe we should just take the passage.
Do it.
And let's look at it.
Let's go.
How far is your passage going?
I think I'm
Verse
going...
8.
Going to verse 8?
Yeah, verse 8.
All right. So we'll do both of ours together.
Cool.
The one from last week and the one for this week.
Let's do it.
Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him. But let him ask in faith with no doubting, for the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. This is the word of the Lord. We are currently seated.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Cool.
So let's talk through the passage and how it applies to our lives, or could apply to our lives, to the people in our congregation.
Yeah.
Let's just start with live, both the neighborhood that you live in, the family or the roommates that you live in. Like, what is this passage?
Yeah. You know, I was thinking about this yesterday as you were teaching, and then I had a moment to hop in and observe our community launch class, right? And I was hearing just the great things that were happening there, and obviously what you were saying, Jim.
And I was even thinking, there are many different kinds of trials. That's what he says there, right?
Yeah.
Various kinds. And so I was even thinking in terms of community. It's like one of the trials that happens is we live in a time where we want to avoid awkwardness as much as possible. And I was like, man, I was even thinking about that yesterday as you guys were talking about in community launch, your ideal community, who's going to be there?
Yeah.
They're going to be people like you. Like, deep relationship is on the other side of awkwardness.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
That's so true.
There's no way around it.
Yeah.
Right? We're all married. At some point, we had awkward conversations with the women would be our spouses, and on the other side of that is marriage. You know, it's a deep relationship, and I think the same applies for community. So maybe you wouldn't see that as like a trial, but when you're in the midst of trying to get to know someone, and maybe you're not from the same background or have the similar stories, and you're trying to like figure out, okay, is this going to be my person? Whatever it is, like, there is something there, if like pushing.
Yeah.
To go on the other side of that could be like a friend that you have for life.
You know why I love that, man? Is I think people tend to exclude the small trials, like the little hard, awkward things.
Yes.
From like, James has nothing to say about that.
Yeah.
I can just avoid that.
Totally.
But when the big thing comes, the moment of martyrdom or the
totally.
The test of my faith and temptation, then I'll show up. But it's actually you practice
cultivate
it
the environment
in the little.
In the little.
Yeah.
And it's oftentimes in the little more than the big.
Totally.
Like, there's legit trials, right, that you would say are elevated as the really, really big things in life, really hard things. But a lot of them, especially when we're talking about where we live, man, it's your roommate that just bothers you or does something that you hate. This is a trial. Yeah. And how can you find joy in it? Well, if God is a great sculptor and is trying to chisel away at parts of you that don't look like Jesus, the becoming perfect or mature is growing more to look like Jesus.
Yes.
And so these like many opportunities or moments that are trials, or if you're married, it's your spouse, right? And your spouse, you guys have a disagreement, or your spouse just does something that grates on you. This is a small trial.
Yeah.
And God is actually going to grow you through that. But it's oftentimes, how do you respond, right? And a lot of times, like, well, I don't see it as an opportunity to become more like Jesus. Or if you've got kids, it's parenting, it's these, or if it's friends and it's your community. All of these are small trials. And the only reason why we can actually find joy in it is because we're growing more mature and becoming like Jesus. And it feels like it's all of these micro opportunities that God is chiseling away at you. At these parts that aren't like Jesus, and the immaturity in you, the sinfulness,
patience,
the fleshly response of like, I'm just gonna let him have it, or I'm impatient, or I'm gonna be bitter, and yet there's another way, and that's the steadfastness of. But if you actually view this as a trial and an opportunity for God to grow you, you will actually grow and become more mature.
Yeah, it made me think, John, a quote I've been reading this dude, George Morrison. He says, life is not a little bundle of big things, but life is a big bundle of little things. And I think that's what you're hitting at, right? There are all these little moments where God is chiseling and shaping us, and we actually go through them and not around them.
Yeah, man. So, the big one that I think about is, I think about Jenny and I. We're coming up on 20 years of marriage.
Let's go.
Yeah, man.
Dang.
And when we started, we were on two completely different sides of most spectrums, to be honest. But one was on the stewardship and generosity. So I think she was more of like a wise steward of our money, which God calls us to be. And I was much more on like,
give it away.
Give it away. But, let's not have a budget. Over spiritualize it. We're trusting God. But it's interesting because like in those early in our marriage, we had stuff where, she was like, if something didn't fit exactly in the budget and God was calling us to, like, then that was determining what God was calling us to do. Versus saying, we need to figure out how to reduce something else in this budget so that we can be more generous. And then I was the dude, like, one time I gave a car to a homeless dude. And didn't talk to her about.
You just said that casually, by the way.
No.
Can you just repeat what you just said?
No, listen. This sounds more godly than it is, right?
First, I thought you said card. Then I realized you said car.
Car, yeah. So I had my car, and I was just like trying to be the most radical Christian out there, and Jesus says, give to those who ask. So the dude was like, he needed stuff. So here's the thing. I didn't actually give him the car itself. I sold it and then gave him the money.
Okay.
And because, I didn't want him driving around on my, but I had committed to this before ever talking to Jenny. And what ended up happening was, I don't know if I helped this guy. Like, that money, I'm pretty sure I didn't. I'm pretty sure that money was spent on things that was probably getting him where he was at. And then the other thing, so then it goes the question, am I actually, like, doing this to love him, or is it to make me feel good about myself? And then it caused Jenny to have to give me a ride 45 minutes to my work every day and then pick me up. So really, I was putting the burden on her of like an hour and a half of driving, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
So it sounded like very generous.
Yeah.
But then over the years, what we've noticed is the as we go through the trials of life, living within the tension of generosity and stewardship, we've both come closer to each other. And I think at this point, sometimes Jenny will be the more generous one and will say, no, we need to sacrificially give more and cut in this area.
Dude, for sure.
And I'll be like, let's look at the budget, okay? But just the fact that the tension, the trials of life and managing money and being together has formed our character to be more like each other in those areas.
Do you feel like this just occurred to me, and we can get back to the document too, like, do you feel like the message out there is more of like everything's on the other side of easy?
Oh, yeah, that's like everything. That's like this, just watch commercials, and that's the pitch they give you.
Yeah.
Is we've created an easy, and once you do that, you get the good thing.
You know what it made me think about, even as you were preaching yesterday, is like Solomon. Because he's given, the Lord asked him what he wants before he steps up to reign over his people. And he asks not for like riches, and he asks for wisdom. And that is like hard,
It's very
and
hard.
it's like, I think that's very counter. I was thinking about that in terms of like, why didn't he ask for the money and the possessions and all that stuff? Well, that would have been very easy. But like asking for wisdom is necessarily going like, God, I want to walk with you and wrestle with you. And, and that's not on the other side of easy. So,
absolutely. Should we talk through?
Let's get through it. Yeah.
Work. How does this passage apply to work?
And the whole passage.
The whole passage.
Yeah, the whole passage.
The considering it joy when you face the trials, the way it forms your character, but also asking God for wisdom and not being double-minded.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when I think about work, there are so often, we talk about this all the time. It's the very reason why I think why we do all of life interviews is like, it's so easy to live by a different set of rules there.
Yeah.
And those set of rules tell you when A happens, do B. When someone is trying to cut you down or maybe usurp your position in some way, defend yourself at all costs, right? And I think there's just like the asking for wisdom part is like a moment of pause.
Yeah.
To go like, God is the God of this space too.
Yeah.
And so like he's alive and I can ask for wisdom here instead of just reacting.
Yeah.
to whatever the moment
Absolutely.
is. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar. You know, I really love what you're saying is a lot of times we can maybe subconsciously and without even acknowledging it, we try to divorce our faith on a Sunday or maybe even at home from then when we go to work. And it's kind of like I bring my skill set into my job, but leave God at the door type thing. And I think what oftentimes can just happen is you encounter situations that your natural flinch is just like, I got to figure it out. And if not, I'm going to problem solve. And if not, maybe I'll ask ChatGPT. You know? And yet I think the beauty of the invitation and implication for our work lives is this actually is an invitation from God. And what I love about this verse is it's one of the things where God actually says if you ask him for wisdom, he will give it generously. It's like God actually says if you ask in faith, he will do it. It's not maybe. And it gives you the ability to invite God into your work and work with God. And I think that that's something where, man, we live in a complicated world. All of our work is complex, regardless of the industry. And there is just this beauty of, man, what would it even look like to cultivate a practice of daily just asking God, would you give me wisdom today? Like, I need you to guide me and lead me versus trying to rely on our own skill set, whatever it may be, you know? So that's one that I just think oftentimes can happen is it's like I leave God at the door and I do my job. You know?
Totally.
I know of someone who ends his workday by prayerfully thinking through the next day's tasks and asking God for wisdom about what should happen that next day. Then prays a prayer of relinquishment of the work of the day so he can direct his attention to his family. And then he, works at home. So he leaves the door of his home office into the rest of his house where there's a whiteboard that has all of the days left until each of his kids turns 18.
Wow.
And at the end of his workday, he wipes off that last number and changes it and asks for God to give him the wisdom for how to love and serve his family with the vigor that he loved and served the people with his work then, and to fully be present there. That is something that comes from someone who's asking God, how do I wisely steward my family, my work, and all of these different things? Give me wisdom for what it looks like to do that. And then this is what God does. Like that is a wisdom, but you can't get that wisdom if you're double-minded.
No.
Like the exception to God giving it is if you're double-minded. And that's just because you're thinking on two different tracks that just don't go together. You can't say, how can I be greedy and more centered on me and also at the same time be generous and more centered on God? That double-mindedness, it doesn't compute. There's no answer where both of those things work together.
Man, I love the example of your friend, dude. That is so awesome. And I just think there's a speed there that he's moving at that I think allows for the space for God to be like invited in. Like, but when you're just quickly kind of whipping, and I think the world kind of like moves us at that speed, you know? And so that's why I think we rush to the solutions. We rush to the quick fixes because, like a lot of folks, I remember a time I was working from home at a time. It's just like you kind of get out of bed, before you know it, you're answering emails. And then you're eating something. And then you're closing out the day. And then you're shifting it. And it's like there's no space if you don't look for it in those ways and create those rhythms in that way to go, God, what do you want me to do here? And so.
Absolutely.
It's great.
What about where we play? This one I feel like might be a little harder, but it's important because it names a category of life of recreation. I'm curious what you guys even do for rest and recreation. Or do you have any fun ever? I mean,
No.
You're dressed like you don't have much fun.
Yeah.
But I imagine you do have some fun sometimes. I mean, I've been to your house and you got like lizards and tarantulas.
Lizards and tarantulas. We got a dog too, the poodle.
Turtle.
Yeah, I like reading.
Mm-hmm.
I like food. I like cooking. I love coffee, so I like going to coffee spots. I love music, and Wyatt's at the age where he's into music, so we do a lot of music-related things together. And I love basketball. So basketball is a hobby, and super fun to watch basketball and follow basketball. So those are some of my food, coffee, music, basketball, and reading books.
That's cool. What about you?
Yeah, I would say working out, listening to music, retro video games, cooking, eating, playing with the kids.
Yeah.
Doing stuff around the house, reading. I mean, I guess a lot of the things he named, sending stupid voice messages to my friends. That's about it. Being on Instagram, going on Twitter and going, why am I on here?
Okay. That's funny, man. Yeah.
Those are some of those things.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, it's barbecue, basketball, pickleball, and hiking. Those are
cool.
are the four
That's
ways
a nice
I have
and
fun.
tidy list, dude.
Yeah. But it's interesting because I think it's actually an intentional list.
Yeah.
We have so many options for how we navigate rest and play and recreation that I think we do have to be intentional about it.
Yeah.
Because it can just become absorbed into the consumer story. And so, years ago, I'll tell you, have I ever told you guys how I got in, really to focus on basketball and barbecue?
No.
No? So, I also like football and I like other types of food. But in 2016, when there was all of the most political tension going on, I said, I got to narrow some of these things down. And then instead of just dabble in each, just asking God, what's a hobby that makes sure that I'm always connected to the more conservative leaning people?
Sure.
What's a hobby that says, makes sure I'm connected to the more progressive leaning people? So barbecue and basketball.
Wow.
And so I cut out some of the other things. I watched less football, was focusing less on eating hummus and more on the barbecue. But that's where that emerged.
Oh, cool.
The reason why I shifted over to pickleball as a exercise is realizing that one of the problems in our world today is the fragmentation.
Yeah.
That every part of life, friendship, work, exercise, it all is supposed to have its own hour. And that's why we all think that we have no time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it's not integrated.
Yeah, there's no blend.
So I'm like, I need to integrate time with friends, with sunshine, exercise, all these things. And pickleball allows for that. If I was doing something else that might be a little bit less relationally connected, then now I've got two separate things to be doing. So I think that came from asking God for wisdom about how to do it. And I think we're in a weird time. Most of history didn't have to say, God, give me wisdom for how I actually play. But we are in a world that's mostly a playground.
Yeah, it's true.
Totally.
It's very true.
Most
Endless
of the world would be
options.
for my hour this week that I'm not working on the farm, I will read my one book.
My one book.
No, there's endless
Seriously.
options.
Yeah.
And even within, you and I both said food, you said barbecue as well. But even if you're going to go out to eat as a foodie, dude, there's 10 million options.
Gosh.
And it takes
And
forever
growing.
even just, you almost think, God, give me wisdom on where I should eat, it's just, so when it comes to play, we are in a oversaturated society with endless options,
Totally. Let's not even get started on how many streaming options there are.
Yeah.
My goodness, So, all right. So the question is, how does the passage implicate our play?
Yeah. What would you guys say for you?
Yeah,
Or-
I think you just gave a great example of
that's a great
the
one.
wisdom and pickleball. I think that's a great implication, a really good example.
Something you said earlier about how, because with the awkwardness thing, because it's sort of smaller and seems insignificant,
Yeah.
people don't say this is a part of what it means to walk with Jesus.
Yeah.
I think it's same here. It's, that it never really gets brought up or thought through.
Yeah, man. I mean, even right now, it's a little bit harder to think about.
Yeah.
Right? Like this moment right now is harder to think about because I think this is an area we often go, okay, like this is outside maybe the boundaries of like, we know God cares about it and he's like not upset with us, but we don't think about it maybe in terms of like, how can we ask for wisdom?
Yeah.
In this place.
Yeah. See, all these things are gifts from God.
Yeah.
I think it's 1 Timothy 4 says like it should be all the good aspects of creation should be received and enjoyed with thanksgiving, if it's received as a gift from God.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you this.
Let's do it.
You tore your labrum, right?
Yes.
And one of your favorite things is working out. How does that trial that you experience in this area of play, how does the passage speak to something like that?
Yeah, I think one of the things I've realized too, because like the reason why I tore my labrum is in my early 20s, was very conscious around body stuff and just machismo stuff, right? And so overexerted myself, ended up with a torn labrum, right? And I think in the years after that, what I was often trying to do is to get back to where I was before that. But then I started to realize, as I got older, it's like, well, why am I working out? You know, and if I'm trying to get back to my early 20s, that's probably not going to happen, and nor does it need to. Like, I think it made me think about the type of workouts I was doing and going, how do I do workouts that take into account now I do have an injury that's probably going to be with me for the rest of my life until I get to heaven. You know, that part of me is restored. And now I need to do some more workouts that like build, like another reason I was tearing my labrum is because I was only working like a lot of upper body stuff because I wanted that look, right? But now I want to, exactly. Yeah. And now it's like, all right, there needs to be a whole health plan here, right? Of how do I care for my body? And a lot of it ultimately is so I can be useful at home and be able to do stuff with the kids and all that sort of stuff versus going, I need a bodybuilder's physique. And so I had to like tailor workouts towards more functionality versus for show.
Yeah.
I think for me on this one, you know, I think if the default for a lot of us is with work, maybe to leave God at the door and go to like our skill set. I think the default for a lot of us with this one is actually to be double-minded.
Talk about it.
And because what James is talking about with being double-minded is living two contradictory lives.
Yeah.
And I think if we're just being honest, where a lot of wild things happen and a lot of sin is you keep God outside of what you do for fun and recreation and on the weekends and who you're hanging out with and maybe the things you're doing. And it's easy to live double-minded and it's a contradictory life to what you would say you believe and how you would behave on a Sunday morning.
Dude, yes. And now you got me thinking, because I was thinking one of the things I named for play was making music. And there was a time when I was like in Christian music, trying to make it, you know, it wasn't that long ago actually, but like even the ways of doing that, I think you could be very double-minded. To go, okay, like we're making these songs that are proclaiming Christ and it's about him, but the way business is done can sometimes tell a different story.
Yeah, and you wonder why some of these like Christian artists have these big crises of faith. It's because there's this, I think, there's this double-mindedness that's allowed, promoted in the industry.
Totally.
And people are walking around saying this is hypocrisy.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I think to your point, like, it operates by two different set of rules. And you're just told when you're in that space, well, that's just how it is. That's how the world works. That's how marketing works. That's how business works. That's how the music business works. And it's like, okay, well, I guess my faith then doesn't really matter here.
Yeah. Dude, totally. And like you can go for the easy target of like going out and getting drunk with your friends. But let's go for like the harder one of how you might actually be double-minded in play is you say, I want to be selfless. I follow a selfless, sacrificial king, and I want to be generous. But when it comes to play, you go weekend mode is just like, when do we all overconsume typically? It's usually on your day off.
Yeah.
And you spend all kinds of money, and you spend way more than maybe what you needed to on food, on beverage, on activities, on shopping, and you do retail therapy. And then you go, oh, I not only spent all my money, I overspent. And now you can't be generous. Well, you're living a double-minded life when it comes to play, you know? And so I think that's the one where it can be easy for all of us. And that's why James is so challenging, even for me, as you go, man, am I actually inviting Jesus into this? Am I praying for wisdom? God, would you give me wisdom on how I play this week, on my days off, on what I'm doing with my free time? Am I walking in righteousness? Am I also upholding the very things I say I believe when I play?
It's great.
Can I give you an example of how I feel like as you're talking, how I'm convicted on the double-mindedness? I have this tendency to, in times of rest, like, you know, people rest in different ways. Sabbath is one of them we feel like that God has given us to do, although I don't think it needs to be practiced the way it was practiced in the Old Testament. But that is a day for me to practice releasing work and just receiving God's gifts and those sorts of things. But I can kind of, like maybe subconsciously, maybe like slightly consciously, kind of fudge it a little bit with, I like reading, therefore I'm going to read books that might happen to be helpful for a sermon coming up.
For real, man.
You know, or you know what I'm saying? Like these sorts of things is a double-mindedness of saying it all depends on me on this one hand, or I need to rely on God. It's a double-minded way of doing Sabbath.
Yeah.
You guys relate to
right.
Yeah. No.
I'm not sitting down actually just writing a sermon, but
totally. It's like, oh, this is restful for me to write. It's like, come on, you know? So, I mean, there are all sorts of tricks like that we play that do reveal the double-mindedness. I totally agree with you guys. Yeah. All right. Should we do scroll?
Let's do scroll.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
This one's going to be a convicting one for sure.
Well, so live, work, play seems to all flow together.
Sure.
You hear people saying that before, but why the addition of scroll, John?
Yeah, we were talking when we were planning our James series, and there's a new study that came out at the end of the year, and it's being quoted by all kinds of people now. Jonathan Haidt has taken it and saying, wow, something needs to change. That last year, the average American spent 2.5 months on their phone.
Wow.
2.5 months of their lives.
Wow.
And you go, because the statistic is about 5.5 hours a day that people spend on their phone. And you just go, this is like, I mean, when we talk about vacationing, most people don't even take a month vacation a year, you know? And so when you begin to talk about where are people inhabiting, people are living on their phones, you know, but you can't actually embody it because you can't jump into, you know, your phone, but you are living and you're viewing things. You might be having online discussions, whatever it is, whatever everybody's doing, the average person is spending 2.5 months on their phone. And so you got to say, man, if we're saying all of life, it would be pretty foolish if we don't include somewhere where 2.5 months of our people's time is being spent in a place.
Yeah, I mean, we'd be fooling ourselves. I mean, statistics show it. I feel it every time I go to like a doctor's office where they used to have like magazines and everything. Now they're just bare because they're like, we know you have your phone. You got your pacifier with you. Don't worry. So, yeah, man, this is an important domain of life for sure.
Yeah. So how does the passage connect to...
Oh, man.
What kind of trials are people running into online?
Where do we start, Jim? Where do we start, man?
Where do we start?
I mean, one, we've talked about this in a number of sermons, the endless advertisements and marketing, right?
Yeah.
That shape the way that you think, that sometimes lead to all sorts of sinful temptation. Like, those are serious trials. You're being inundated with messaging, with ads, with things you're not even searching for that are coming to you, sexually explicit content, all that sort of stuff. That as you even try and navigate those, or an algorithm that's telling you, here's why people are upset and why you should be upset too. You know, this is like all coming at you. And that's a trial.
Yeah.
That's a trial that I think we all experience in one way or another online.
Yeah. People spending billions of dollars to capture your attention and to play with your neurochemical processes so that you are locked in on them. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the trials, like when we talk about these micro trials, is it's proven that it causes and is linked to anxiety.
Yes.
You know, and so now you go, wow, this thing that I'm spending a lot of my time doing actually is increasing anxiety. And then what are you going to do with that?
I'm thinking about social media too, because I know online is, well, we're saying scroll. Like, we're talking about social media.
All of it. It could be social media. It could be what you're streaming, what websites you're going to, you know, all these sorts of things. Even, you know, I'll tell you one for me. Maybe you guys could help me troubleshoot this here. Is I feel like probably the biggest trial, the biggest challenge I have with my phone is the amount of text messages that I get, not just in general, but like I'm about to go to bed, right?
Yeah.
And or even not right into bed, like 6 o'clock, you know, and this is part of the challenge of being a pastor, and it's like, it's a part of the deal.
Sure.
But like, I glance at my phone to check what time it is or to look at a recipe, and it's like someone's been diagnosed with cancer, someone's girlfriend just broke up with them. It's the hardest possible theological question you could think of gets sent your way. And, you know, you glance down, you got 5 of these. And the church is flooded. You know,
there's a group chat with 35 gifts.
Yeah. That's right. You look down and there's just a question mark because you haven't answered in time, and it just like this. I think it can really quickly get my anxiety going, my attention spun out. What do you guys have for me? How would you?
I feel like you've already figured this out.
How so?
Because I think so as far as like being on the other side of hard, what I'm thinking about, right? I think something that you have done is I noticed you answer a lot of things in batches.
That's true.
And you know, like, dude, that's hard because you know that there are some people that are going to be upset in some ways because they're like, you're not getting back to them urgently. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Or, they may feel like you're sliding them because you left them on red for 2 hours or whatever. You know what I mean? But like, there's something that you've gone there for, like, hey, I'm not Jesus. Like, I can't do everything and respond everywhere all at once. And so I got to do this at one time. And so I feel like that's a hard thing. And I know that you do.
Yeah. I try to have like 2 or 3 times a day. Where I respond and then leave it to that.
If you're a real people, please, I'll be honest, that's hard to do.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. Because you want to, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
You know, I think we all battled this as pastors, right? Of like wanting to be there where people are asking those hard questions and respond quickly and have the right thing to say. And I think you actually, by doing that, probably fends that off a bit.
Yeah.
I think the trouble that I have is even if I'm not answering it, it's like it gets lodged into my heart if I see it. Or you see like just in the little preview of the text that, this is a biggie.
Yeah. Oh, dude, for sure.
Yeah.
But I think, dude, too, like what I have often seen in the world is like there's a value that the world places on people who are able to like figure it out quickly,
Yeah.
have the right thing to say quickly, like respond quick. And so I think there is like some wisdom in giving pause, because even maybe as you're feeling that, maybe you're praying about it. You know, God, what do you want me to say back to?
You know, that's a good point. What you brought up, I mean, I should have listened to my own sermon yesterday, of paying attention to what actually the trials are surfacing.
Yeah.
Like, and saying, okay, is this fear?
Yes.
Is this people pleasing? Is this an over dependency on me?
Yeah.
And bringing that stuff to God and saying, do what you will with these motives that are surfacing, these fears that are surfacing. That's good.
Yeah. The other one on scrolling, you got the trials, but then I think that wisdom is really important as well. And I know we've talked a lot about just algorithms and how everything is curated for you. And you can actually live in your own curated world.
Yes.
That actually isn't reality.
Yeah.
And then you might be living in an entirely different curated world, and it takes a lot of wisdom to navigate what is real, what is reality.
Yes.
What other perspectives need to be heard or seen, because you might only be hearing one perspective or seeing one perspective, you know, and everything is catered to you. And I think that takes a lot of wisdom that we need from God, because we get spun out a lot of times by whatever algorithms we see, you know?
And that's ever increasing.
Ever increasing.
Like, it may be some of you remember the wild days of Facebook, like before the algorithm. You know, but you know that there was all sorts of bad things with that, in like 2016ish, 15ish, where everyone was seeing everything. You know, there was some hard things with that, but at least you were able to see what other people were saying who disagreed with you on the other side of the aisle. Now things are so curated that you literally, I mean, there's a tab that says for you.
Yeah.
So I mean, to actually learn and to love people, like to actually learn about it's gonna take a good deal of wisdom.
And a lot of us are acting based off of what we're seeing in our algorithm, making decisions in life, you know?
For sure.
If you want to have just like a crazy experience, take like a friend or your spouse or whatever, and just open up your YouTube app.
Yes.
And just compare what kind of things are being sent your way.
Yeah.
Or someone who has a very different, like, political leaning or something.
Yeah.
In 2016, I started doing that because people were at each other's. I said, "Can I just see your YouTube?" And like look through it.
You're like, oh,
and it's
no
like
wonder.
every single video. It wasn't 2016. It was 2020 actually when it happened. Every single one is like reconfirming whatever someone was talking about.
Yep.
And it was enlightening, because if you're like, look, every wise person I know of is saying all of the same thing.
The algorithm versus the all God rhythm.
Ooh.
Is that it? No.
But, workshop it, man. I think there's something there.
Workshop it. Pray for wisdom on that one.
Yeah, pray for wisdom. Yeah, that's for your work. Don't be double-minded. Ask God for wisdom, and He'll generously give it to you.
I thought that was a bar, but never mind. Man. All right. Yeah. No, there's a lot here. Anything else on where we scroll?
I think I think we should land with, in what ways do we need Jesus? You need Jesus to help you. But what are some of the other
I was
ways?
going to use that in my next sermon, but I think I'll leave that.
Hey, man, workshop it.
Oh, man. All right. In what ways do I need Jesus?
Like, does the
in
passage...
this passage called, I mean, I think some of what you were saying yesterday, Jim, of like, actually, the heart of what you were saying yesterday is this is not about us being like the coach. Or your example, which made me very squeamish, of the shoulder.
Dislocated. What I thought was a dislocated shoulder.
Oh my gosh, I still feel that.
Tried to jam it back in.
Oh man. Like, that's not the sort of grit that this passage is calling us for. Everything that you said presupposes like the work of Christ and us actually being new creations in him who are now empowered to go through hard things, not by gritting our teeth, but the power of the Spirit at work in us that actually strengthens us. When we're weak, we're strong because he's with us, empowering us to live for him.
I just think about Jesus is the true humanity, the perfect, the second Adam, the only one who is perfectly lived out in the midst of trials, counting it joy, and that's Hebrews 11 or 12. Consider it joy when you, I'm going into James, but for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, and we were the joy that was set before him. That like, if everything we're after is on the other side of hard, we were on the other side of hard. And Christ went through the heart of the cross to redeem us, to bring us into the family, to forgive our sins. And all of this stuff can't be really lived out unless he's done that for us first, and we're following the tracks that he's laid.
Amen.
Yeah, amen to that. I mean, I don't have much to add after what Jim just said. The only thing I would say is we need Jesus not only to change our hearts, but to give us his eyes to change our perspective. Because the only way that we would ever embrace a trial and consider it to be joy is if we actually have God's eyes, the eyes of Christ that can see what he is up to. Because nothing is wasted in the life of faith, because he's using it somehow for his purposes. And according to James, it's to make us more like him, that we might be perfect, you know? And so I just think that that's a huge one, even throughout James, that has hit me in reading some of these challenging passages, is there is an invitation that we would see the way that God sees. Versus I think our default is, well, this is what I see it as, and so I want to avoid it.
Well, guys, the book of James is full of so much wisdom, so much that implicates every dimension of our lives. And so, man, we're just getting started. And I am so excited. I know we, as pastors, we are all very excited to walk through this book as a church and to hear all the things that God has to tell us through the letter of James. And so, if you haven't picked up one of these, I don't know if we've made these available just yet, but not yet. Next week. So these will be available. Welcome desk, maybe on your seats. If you can't find it, come find one of us, and we'll make sure you have it. And guys, let's just let this be a season where we are seeped in the book of James. We're hearing from it and being made whole and complete, not by our own strength, not by our own grit, but by the fact that Jesus is at work in us, shaping us, and forming us to be his people. And so thank you. And guys, we'll see you next time right here on the All of Life podcast.